But yeah, welcome everyone. I'm Ryan Burns. I'm head of community here at the Startup Network. I'm really thrilled to have you all here today for our webinar, Score More Goals, getting higher performance from your senior team. In today's session, we're going to dive deep into what it takes to elevate the performance of your senior team. So we'll explore key insights and actionable strategies that
Our
can help
voice,
you
right?
unlock
Just
new,
only record what
sorry about that, and unlock new levels of collaboration and success within your organization. And today's session is going to be led by Grant Downie. He's an accomplished executive coach and business mentor with a whole bunch of other areas of his interest. He's basically right in the middle of all things startups right now. And he's got years of experience helping founders and teams reach their full potential. Grant's expertise in leadership and team dynamics will guide us through this transformative discussion. So without further ado, let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Grant Downie.
Thanks, thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Ryan, and hello to everyone. As I put in the chat, I'm coming to you today from Victor Harbour in the southeast of South Australia, and I'm broadcasting from the lands of the Ramajeri people, and I pay my respects to their leaders, past, present, and emerging. And as an entrepreneur and innovator, I'm really intrigued, and I usually do a bit of research on the traditional owners of the lands that I'm on, especially when I present, because the First Nations people, especially of Australia, having been here for millennia, were really very inventive, and I often get some interesting insights about the things that farming or other interesting commercial almost enterprises that our First Nations people got into. So it's pretty easy to do a little bit of research and find out some of that stuff, and I always enjoy it. So that just adds a little bit of real life, to my acknowledgement of the traditional owners. So there we go. And as Ryan has said, today's session is about score more goals. Let's have a quick look at what that might look like. Oh, there we go. And look, my face. So while I'm presenting, I'm going to be here in the bottom right of your screen. And when we get through to the question and answer session later on, then I'll turn the presentation off and we'll be able to just have a question and answers with just me and you guys asking you questions. And so score more goals. As Ryan said, I've been associated with organizations of different sizes. So I started my career last century. I love saying that. Look at these gray hairs. Last century, I started my career in corporate, and I was many years in corporate, more than 15 before I started doing startup and entrepreneurial things. However, the startup and entrepreneurial things that I started to do back in about 2010, 2011, where I ran some of the first weekend events for startup for founders and aspiring founders, some of the first weekend events in Australia back in 2011. I've also gone on to work with programs like the Startup Network, the CSIRO On program, La Trobe and others. And I've got a page at the end just with some of the things about me, in case there is anything on there that is interesting for people. So what we will do is I'll go through the presentation, and feel free to pop questions into the chat, and Ryan will bring those to my attention if there's anything that needs to be addressed straight away. But then I definitely will make time at the end to be able to go through with you all some questions. So the session today, nominally it's about an hour. I will probably only talk for about 20-25 minutes in terms of presenting. I've got a few slides to go through. I encourage you to take screenshots. If you see something interesting on a slide, definitely take a screenshot, because that will help you to make notes and refer back to things. I'll have specific links to websites and things as we go through. So all of that, I've tried to make it as easy for you to access as possible. And so I definitely encourage you to go through that. So as I said, I've been working with founders and startups for certainly more than a decade, and small business managers for nearly 20 years. And then before that, across many of the functions of large organizations. And so when I think about why I'm here today and why I continue to do work with founders and others in the startup community, I've got a really broad experience, and I love helping founders and business owners and business leaders to think about the purpose of their work, what they're trying to do, and to help them to get insights and perform better. It's one of the things that I really enjoy. It's why I do coaching and mentoring. Will it be any good? Will it be any good? What I find when you do education is there's a concept called just too late. What I often find is that people are most interested, most motivated to learn when they feel like they should have known this stuff just yesterday. Like something's happened, maybe a mistake's happened, and they go, wow, if only I'd known this stuff yesterday, that thing wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have made that mistake. If you never make the mistake, often you never reflect and you don't necessarily see value in the learning. And so it's a really interesting, in terms of that sort of the psychology of learning, it's an interesting perspective that I find really useful. If you made a mistake, often that really sharpens your interest in learning how to cover it. So I think some of you have been trying to lead teams, or you're thinking about leading teams. And what I'm hoping to do as we go through today is to spark some insights for you about things that you might have done differently, or things that you are thinking about maybe starting to plan for in the future. In terms of the length, like I said, probably 20, 25 minutes. And then we're going to, one of the things that I really want to do is to make time for you to ask your questions. And so there will definitely be time at the end to go through your questions. So let's see what we're doing. So in terms of performance and team performance, what's with the endless sports analogies? I know in Australia, everyone's sports mad. And when we've just had the Olympics and we've had our best ever Olympics in terms of gold medals, everybody's pretty connected to sport. We had the Matildas and the World Cup last year locally. There are lots of reasons why people are really connected to sport. Every Monday morning, the classic water cooler conversation, how did your team go on the weekend? Sport is just a really useful way of thinking about teams, because there's a commonly understood field of play and rules of play. Again, when you've got your favorite sport, you know all about how it's played. And so there's this idea, or a familiarity, I guess, with a group of people who've got some pretty clearly defined roles, and how they achieve success is also pretty well understood. And one of the things that I really like when you are a bit into sport, when you have a favorite sport, you can actually look at a team or two teams or however many teams playing, and if you understand how the sport is played, you can actually say, oh, that team are playing really well, or that individual or that group of people, they're really quite talented and doing well. One, just a very short in terms of that idea of seeing and understanding talent. Like, I'm really quite passionate about more people being able to do that with regard to startup. Like, being a founder in some ways is absolutely a team role. And what I am trying to do in many ways is to help people understand, well, what does a founder who's performing well in their role, what do they look like? What does talent look like? So sports is a really useful way to connect with this idea of whether or not a group of people are performing well together. And so, again, whatever your sport is, whether it's AFL or lacrosse, football, basketball, Quidditch, curling. Like curling, I look at a curling field and I go, I have no idea which team is doing the best, and I have no idea what those people who are very actively brushing the ice surface, I have no idea, whether or not they're a talented brusher of the ice. But people who understand curling, they know. And so this idea of having a bit of an idea of what sport you're playing in and what field you're actually on can be really helpful. It feeds into this idea of how to try and frame up performance for your own team. And so even though most founders associate more as outsiders and rule breakers, success in their chosen field of activity in the business that they're trying to run still has to be defined in terms of maybe the market that you're in, who your customers are, might be your field of play, and you definitely have to understand how do we score goals. And so again, the framework that is useful for that is building on your vision. So the founder vision is a crucial sort of foundation layer in this pyramid of performance. And for me, a lot of the work that I do with founders and their teams, as the business grows and they start being called a CEO or feeling like they need to perform as a CEO, and then maybe the business gets to the point where they actually bring in a professional or an external CEO. Always the success of the business relies on delivering on the founder's vision. So the founder's vision is just so important. And I know that not all of you in this session are founders yourselves necessarily, but this idea of what does success for our business actually look like gets connected all the way back to, well, what's the vision or the intent for the business? What was it that the founder initially wanted to try and achieve? What impact did they want to have in the world? And so the vision of the founder obviously needs to be translated into a set of strategy and a set of plans about how they're going to go to market and capture customers and start to deliver on their value proposition. And so there's this escalation of, you have a vision, you think about it in a structured way, you then start offering to customers after some customer discovery, and your purpose, the outcome, success, scoring goals, is delighting those customers so that they become passionate advocates. They love whatever it is that you do for them, and they tell other people that they know have the same challenge. They say, hey, you should talk to the Startup Network. You're trying to start a new startup, you should talk to the Startup Network. They do a really good job of educating and connecting founders and supporters across the community. So when you get to the point where your business is being acknowledged and you've got satisfied customers who are then actually referring other potential customers to you, that's absolutely a level of success. So that really helps in terms of you defining what does success look like for you. Starts with the business, all those things that I just said. And even for a founder, I touched on it briefly before, but when you're a founder initially, and you're really just trying to figure out how you might even offer some sort of a solution, you're not even really sure whether or not you have a business yet, and you're doing everything yourself. As a founder, the things that you need in a team and from a team, change over time. At the start, it's really just you doing everything, maybe in a side gig, in a side hustle. Maybe you have a day job and you're building your startup, in the time after your day job, after you earn enough money to pay all the bills for your startup. And then you get to the point where you have customers repeatedly. You might have taken some funding, but you might just be funding from revenue. And so at that point, you start to build a team. And once your business has a level of success and a level of performance capability, you can then start to actually build out your team more from, in terms of even the pyramid that I just had. If you reimagine that as an organization, you as the founder might be sitting at the top, and you have a senior team, and then at the point where you're the size of a Canva or an Atlassian, you have thousands of people in your organization. And so even that, to a degree, is team building. And the founder has to have a part in team building through that whole evolution of the business. And so, again, that idea of how do you need to think about team, shifts a little bit as your startup grows into a business and then grows into an organization, and then an enterprise is probably what we would call the Canva and the Atlassians of the world. So in that context, what even is a high performing team? Because we talked earlier about Quidditch. Well, capturing the golden oh, look out, now I've forgotten my Quidditch lore. But essentially, capturing the golden snitch is the way that you win the game. Like, so high performance is capturing the golden snitch as quickly as you can, even though the rest of the team, the beaters and the rest of them are all trying to get that quaffle through the hoops. But high performing is very much based on the context. So as a founder or even as a leader of a team, high performance for you in your situation is so reliant on your context. And so that's one of the things that you really need to spend a bit of time reflecting on and starting to define. And really, you can get other people to help you to define what success looks like. But that's one of the key roles of a founder or even a team leader, is to help to define for the team, well, what is the game that we're playing? What does scoring a goal look like? And how are we able to measure things like the effort that it takes or the time that it takes? Some of you may be familiar with concepts like the cost of acquisition of a new customer, or the time to activation of active users for an app. Those different measures of business activity are not in and of themselves success. And again, one of the concepts that you might have heard of is vanity metrics. So things like signups or downloads of an app. Some people might say, "Oh, look at how quickly people are downloading our app or signing up to our app." But really, what's happening is that they downloaded the app and they might never use it even for a first time. What you really need is you need people to be using your app in a way that they choose to pay for value, or there's some way that you get a value exchange, and that they love your app so much that they're recommending it to their friends, so that then you have a growth in active users of your app. And so again, what even is a goal, and therefore what is a high performing team, is really specific about the context. That's one of the key jobs that you need to sort out. So when you've got a clearer idea of the game that you're trying to play, that the market you're in, the field of play that you're trying to perform on, then you need to start thinking about, well, what are all of the roles that need to be taken? What's our backline or our defense? Who are our strikers? Who's actually going to try and score the goals for us? You start to think about building a team to be successful in that endeavor. And so, there's no, single definition of a high performing team in terms of the roles that you need for that. It's really contextual. And some businesses, and running an app business versus running a bricks and mortar business, they need completely different skills, and measuring success is very different in both of them. And so you need to have an understanding of, well, what does success look like for you, and therefore what are some of the roles? We'll touch on things like business model a few slides down the track. Again, I'm hoping that most of you will be familiar with concepts like the business model canvas, and that can also be one of the key tools you use in understanding, well, what does your team need to be capable of? What should we try and get, what skills and experience and knowledge should we try and bring into this team? So that helps you to figure out, well, what does high performing look like? But as you start to build a team, often one of the challenges that you have in finding people to join your team, especially in the early days when it's just you as an individual founder, part of the challenge is actually figuring out, well, what do I need a new team member to have? And typically, people like finding other people who love football as much as you do, as an example, are easy people to find. And so what often happens is that people start building a team by finding people who are similar to them. And, I love a good Venn diagram. And so, this Venn diagram is two people and all of their interests and values and a bunch of other stuff that we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But this is sort of two people. These two circles represent two people, and these people are really similar. There's lots of overlap. In the middle there, you can imagine that on Monday morning, they barrack for the same team, they get together and they go through how all the individuals in their team on the weekend either played brilliantly for a win or played terribly and should be traded because the team had a terrible loss on the weekend. And so often when people start building their own teams, they're already spending time with other people who like similar things, who hang out in similar places, who do similar activities. It's easy to find people who are similar to you. But when you think about a team, let's stick with football in terms of defenders and strikers, like there's such different roles. And so you actually need in your team, as you think about all the things that your team needs to do to be successful, what you really need is complementarity. So you need to have people who are interested in trying to deliver the value that you want to through your business. And so, you need to have some overlap in the middle there. But what is much more valuable than the two people on the left is the two people on the right have plenty in common to make some bonds, but they've got all these interesting and different things that each of them can do. That means that they can both do quite different things within the business. And again, in the early days of startup, often even those first two people will be doing the jobs of maybe 10 different jobs, but it's such early days that you can't afford to employ 10 different people yet. But thinking about complementarity, thinking about the different things that need to be done and what your different skills are, thinking about complementarity is an invaluable way to start thinking about building a team. And so one of the pretty common, I guess, frameworks for a complementary team, especially in startup, is the hipster, hustler, hacker. And recently people have added humanist, which I think is another valuable role and complementary role. But what I wanted to use this to show was that this is three people who almost definitely do not hang out together. They almost certainly don't follow the same football team, and they probably don't even follow the same sport. So they're probably not even standing around the water cooler on Monday morning having a chat about their team and what happened on the weekend. These people are really quite different. And so how do you start to get some overlap? When you're building a team, how do you try and find out whether or not these people can perform together to try and score goals for your customers in a complementary and collaborative way? And so again, one of the things that we'll talk about a bit more in the next slide is this idea of having some overlap in the middle. You want everybody to be interested in the purpose, the stated purpose of your startup or your business. You want people to be associate with and maybe be motivated by trying to deliver the value. If your business is all about trying to make retail spending online easier, maybe it's around virtual changing rooms so that people can try on clothes online because they want to be able to buy more confidently in a virtual retail space. If that's the value that you're trying to deliver, you want to bring together people who are interested in that. And what you also want to make sure of, because startup is hard. Again, one of the soapboxes that I get on, I won't get on that soapbox today, but startup is hard. And it's a marathon. It takes a long time, and there are lots of up and downs. There are days when you just feel like nothing is going your way, and if there's not something strong holding a group together, those challenges can end up breaking up your team. And so this idea of let's better understand whether or not the people that we're thinking about having in our team, or the people who are now in our team, let's try and be a bit more explicit about whether or not they find our purpose motivating, and whether or not we've got similar goals and interests. And so, for these three, often, or stereotypically, let's go stereotypical, a hustler is really outgoing, confident often, and I describe them as value perceptive. Like they are really good at figuring out whether or not the person they're currently talking to might be able to get value from the business's idea, so that they can pursue that a bit harder to try and make a sale. So that is sort of one complementarity, one way to think about complementarity. The others, hacker typically is a bit more reserved, and a hipster just looks at the world differently. Hipsters are just so sort of focused on the way that a customer experiences, user experience, and other ways of looking at the world. So this idea of a group of people wanting to have a set of shared values, but also being similarly motivated by the same sort of purpose or intent, all of those things are so important in your team. So just very briefly, this idea of, well, how do we even start to talk about whether or not we have shared values? Because often people don't even necessarily think about what their own values are. Values are subconscious. They drive all of the decisions that we make. But really, when we are a part of when we're out interacting socially, the only things that we really see in other people are behaviors. Like we see the things that other people do. We maybe see the looks that they make on their face, but all that we can see is the things that are above the water. This concept of the iceberg, with the things that you can see above the water, but then the things that are invisible below the water. All the things that are below the water, like our feelings, even the skill and experience, but absolutely beliefs and values. It's not you don't necessarily have them listed on your lapel, wear your heart on the sleeve, I guess is a phrase, but they're much harder to figure out. But what is really valuable is that there are a number of exercises that you can go through, which I have put on a subsequent slide. There are exercises you can go through to have a conversation with yourself, to understand your own values and beliefs, the things that drive the choices that you make and the behaviors that you share and exhibit. And then you can do that with other people. And so it's a real, for founders, it's a sort of thing that is a skill to practice. I know the Startup Network, in some of their sessions, they actually look really specifically at articulating your values, at being able to connect with your subconscious and mindfulness. Those are things that are actually really important, and unfortunately still too often are a bit rare. So getting a way to be able to talk about what your values are, to find out whether they are shared values, is one of the most important activities that you can do as a founder or a leader of a team, trying to build out your team, or trying to help your team to perform better together. The shared values helps to build that core, but then you really need to be thinking about, well, what are the things that we need to do together as a team that we need some different skill and capabilities for? And so one of the frameworks that I'm actually qualified in is this one called the Team Management System, or the Team Management Profile, this particular tool. And it actually talks about the different roles that go into making a team. So you can sort of trace around in a clockwise direction from probably about 10 o'clock, where the first people are thinking about doing analysis and thinking about, well, what might an idea for a business be? You then do some of that early customer discovery. You find out whether or not people are even have this problem that you're hoping to solve, and how many of them there are. And then you go all the way around to building a solution, monitoring whether or not that solution is being well received or helpful. And so this versus something like Myers-Briggs, which some of you might be familiar with, I find it a bit more useful because it helps you to think about, well, what are your preferences and how do they fit into this idea of a project and getting some project work done. But like Myers-Briggs, this model is based on a set of sort of psychology around personality. Again, the next slide talks a little bit about what Ocean actually is, because one of the things in terms of a team, one of the things that undermines a team is that people see difference as being either difficult to manage, a challenge, or sometimes even wrong. Like, I'm an introvert, and I'm often in teams where the extroverts are thinking while they're talking. The introverts are not saying anything. The extroverts are going, well, they're not even committed. Like, where's their energy? Why aren't they participating? And the introverts are all sitting there thinking, will that person just shut up so I can think more? Like, it's just this whole different way of looking at the same situation, that a tool like this helps people to get a language about exploring the differences. so that introverts and extroverts can actually realize that they're both really committed and really interested, but they just work differently. And therefore, if they are able to have different conversations, they can be much more collaborative and constructive. So this idea of how do you quantify diversity, or how do you quantify difference, and how do you then think about whether or not that difference is complementary, a framework like this can be invaluable. But it's not necessary. Like, you don't need to only use this. It's not the only solution. This is just a list of a few. This is the tool itself, but there's 16 personalities. Is a free online tool to use to get a sense of what your own preferences are. And then the ocean is a set of personality dimensions, which I'll just briefly go through. I mention all these things because as a founder or a team leader, a part of what you need to help your team to understand is that those with a different way of working, those with a different skill or insight, you need everyone in the team to better understand and accept how difference can be complementary and a basis or a foundation for collaboration, rather than just something frustrating. If only they would talk about what their ideas are when we have a meeting. If only they would do that, working with them would be so much easier. Well, not everybody works that way, and understanding how to work between extroverts and introverts, as an example, it's just one of the ways that you, as a leader and a builder of teams, need to be able to think about whether or not you have the right people in your group. So just very briefly, this is the sort of the big five, the five sort of dimensions of personality. We don't need to go in them, but it's just again a link for you if you're interested. Like I just said, personality, and there's even different camps about how scientific personality science even is. But it's not necessarily about whether it's right or wrong. It's about whether or not a tool can be helpful. And the reality is that all models are wrong, but some models can be helpful. So that, I think, is a useful way to think about this. Renice, you've turned your camera on. Have you got a question?
No, sorry, didn't mean to turn it on.
Oh, no. So please leave your camera on. I'm delighted. I was thinking that maybe you turned it on because you wanted to try and ask a question. But no, you carry on there. Hang in. We're not far from the question session. So personality, like I say, personality even as a science, there are different camps. But I always say models. I had just said, all models are wrong in some way, but some models are really useful because they help you to think about the world that you're looking at. They help you to talk to other people about what you see, maybe share your vision. Those are the ways that you can use a model, even if it's not precise all the time. So that helps you to think about the differences between people, helps you to think about how you might try and bring them together to achieve something together. I talked earlier about the business model canvas. I'm hoping that for most of you, this is something that you have seen before. But again, a tool or a model like the business model canvas helps you to think about what are all the things that your business needs to be good at in order to be successful, and who do we have now in terms of the skills and capabilities, who do we need to bring into the team to maybe improve our capability in one area of our business model or the performance around our business model. Again, just a couple of links there to things that I have found invaluable. We are nearly at the end. I have gone a little bit longer than I said I would at about 30 minutes or so. I've just got a couple more slides and then we'll flip over into the questions. When you have a good idea of what your team or your business needs to achieve in terms of how to score more goals, and you have a team, and you've maybe had a team together for a while, maybe 6 months, maybe 6 years, this is a model by a fellow called Patrick Lencioni, which sort of talks about these 5 really classic dysfunctions of a team. It's one of the things that we emphasized in the promotion of this session. Teams can be really challenging things. First-time leaders especially, coming to terms with other humans, with personalities, with people who want to do things differently, can be a really, really challenging. One of the biggest insights that I got in my own leadership journey like more than 20 years ago now. But for me, one of the really big insights was absolutely about this diversity aspect. I had the way that I liked to be managed, and so I managed everybody else the way that I liked to be managed. Supportive and encouraging. But the reality, if you think about someone who's just learning to drive, they don't know. Like, they don't know all the different tools, the pedals, what to do with the steering wheel and the brake, and you have to be directive. You have to tell them how to do their job. And so different people joining your team at different times have different needs. And part of what really helps you as a leader is to realize that people are different and how to bring those differences together. So some of the things that can really undermine that is an absence of trust in the things that you all wrote when you signed up for the session today. I've had a bit of a read through some of those. The things that really, when you were a part of a high-performing team or a great team, some of the things that you wrote in there were absolutely based on clarity of role, a feeling of camaraderie, and that in some ways helps with trust. Like, an absence of trust is when people aren't sure whether or not they're doing a good job. They aren't sure whether or not their leader is genuine in feedback. Maybe they're not getting any feedback. And so building trust is one of the key things that, as a leader, you need to be conscious of doing for your team in trying to build them up to perform better together. Building trust, it's often the things that sound trite, but they're actually some of the hardest things to do. So do what you say you're going to do, be predictable, be genuine, be transparent, share, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Those are some of the things that, when the people in your team see that you are genuine and you are genuinely trying, and that you are not judgmental when people make mistakes, which is one of the main things that a startup needs to do for at least 3/4 of its life. When people make mistakes, they're not being blamed or torn down. Those are the things that can help to build trust. Fear of conflict. Certainly one of the things that people love about hanging out together is that they are often not in conflict. Like, they agree about the same things. They love the same team or whatever. And lots of people are not very good at managing conflict or managing these differences of ideas. But the core of complementarity is that people are coming from different perspectives. And if you have a degree of trust, if you have articulated your shared values and people agree on the purpose, finding ways to have meetings or conversations where you entertain a different perspective and you have a degree of conflict about what is the best thing to do next, that leads to some much more robust action planning, but insights about whether or not you're currently even thinking about doing the best things. And so finding ways to bring differences of opinion into a collaborative conversation rather than screaming and shouting at each other or slamming the door and walking out. Finding ways to overcome a fear of conflict, to embrace differences of opinion in a way that means that you can have different opinions, but you can talk about what they are in a constructive way. Lack of commitment. We talked earlier about trying to find a way, especially as a founder, trying to find a way to test whether or not the people that you're inviting into your team are motivated by the same things that you are. And so both a lack of commitment and then avoidance of team accountability, can be really. Oh, that's you, Ryan, putting a thing. I just saw something pop up in the chat, but it's Ryan saying, put your questions in chat. The commitment and accountability are really often tied together. What you want is people who are motivated by and committed to the things that you want the business to achieve. And then they're also, they're holding themselves accountable. So they're trying their hardest. And when mistakes are made, that they own them and they try and find a way to get through them. And then the inattention to team objectives, like it's the last one on this list. To my mind, it's one of the things that is almost the easiest thing to manage. Like, if you've managed to build a team with some culture that helps you to manage all of the dysfunctions above that inattention, it's really easy to then work with someone. Not everybody is detail oriented. Not everybody works with team objectives in the same way, but you need to be confident that people are committed and capable in order to be able to contribute to your objectives. And if they continue to to not deliver on the objectives that they should be carrying as part of the team, that's definitely something as a leader that you need to manage. I just want to finish with a very brief touch on culture. This is a whole more than one session all on its own. But as a founder or a business leader, one of the realities is that humans are hardwired to fit into a team that they want to join. And as a leader of a team or a leader of a group of people, what you do, your actions cast a really long shadow. And so as founders or leaders of teams wanting to lead your team to higher performance, you just have to be so conscious of the actions, the words that you're speaking, the actions that you're taking in order to try and emphasize the things that you believe are important to success, model the things that you believe are important to success, and then look out for and encourage others to also do that. Organizational culture grows and evolves. It can absolutely be managed. And as a founder or a leader of a team, even within a larger organization, being conscious of actually building an organizational culture and the one that you want is really crucial. There's just a brief link down the bottom there to a framework that I found really helpful. But I wanted to finish on culture because, for me, it's one of the things that a leader definitely needs to think about. Just lastly, I talked about some of that stuff right at the start. I didn't touch on company director. Like, I've got a few different perspectives on performance as well. So compliance and otherwise is really important, and those other things in there. So let's stop that and go back to questions. So how was that? When you finish just blurting for half an hour, it's always a bit like, oh goodness, I hope people have been able to get something interesting out of all that. But let me know, what are some of your thoughts or questions? Either take yourself off mute and ask them, or pop them into the chat. What are people thinking? You're welcome, Cherry.
Yeah, folks, if you guys have any questions, feel free to just come off mute and you can ask it yourself. It could be about anything, whether it's a topic we discussed today or something that's on your mind. Feel free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't see any, Grant. Everybody's being a little shy today, I guess. That's okay.
Yeah, I try hard not to be scary.
Oh.
Overseas team members for ease. The elements of diversity. So again, finding ways to be able to talk about what is different about us. That back to the Venn diagram. Like, Venn diagrams are so valuable. Being able to have a conversation with overseas team members about what is it that is motivating for them. Like, what are the things that they are excited about, or what makes them want to be a part of the team, and then explore. So what in that, in working with the rest of the team, what do you find easy? What are the things that are challenging? That the first step, one of the really valuable perspectives, I guess, on leading is that always deliver good news in a team, in a group, and always deliver bad news one-on-one. And so something like a person who feels like they're having some problems with the rest of the team, or you feel like they're maybe not giving their best contribution to the team, have that conversation one-on-one and be really sensitive and explore with them about, well, what are the things that they think are going well, and what are the things that are frustrating for them? What are the things that they feel are preventing them from being able to make their best contribution? And by digging through some of that, and again, that helps to build trust. But it can be a really difficult thing for a leader to do. Again, if most of your team is in the location or the region or the culture, the sort of social culture that you associate with, you understand better how to have even these challenging and tricky conversations. And so you might get help. You might find somebody else from that international culture who can maybe give you some pointers as well. One of the classics around authority. So as a team leader, different cultures from around the world have very different perspectives to leader and the level of necessarily respect, because I think even people who challenge, if you can find a good way to challenge and manage conflict well, you're arguing with your boss is not necessarily being disrespectful, but lots of cultures would never question their boss. The boss is always right, and so they don't feel comfortable. And so finding a way to be able to get a team member like that into a one-on-one conversation where you are able to encourage them to talk about, well, what do they think are the things that are going well and things that are not going so well. Creating the space to have that conversation can really give you some insights into what that international team member is thinking, but it can also work in the other direction, and it can help them to better understand, well, how might they behave differently in order to make a different contribution. And so that builds, by having the conversation, it builds trust. By then supporting the person when they try to behave differently or interact differently, supporting and encouraging them. Those are the things that can really help. And often, what you find, especially with back to sport, with an international sport like football, sometimes that, you can find these elements of commonality where you can have a conversation with someone from a completely different culture about a topic that you're both pretty comfortable with. And sometimes that can help, to build the relationship. So great question, and certainly very common, increasingly common, working from home. COVID did us all such a favor in terms of making remote work so accessible and just normal. And so, lots of teams are being built internationally now, and that's definitely one of the challenges that you'll have. So.
Yeah, and Fareez, actually, I'm gonna put something in the chat as well for you. What we've done a couple of VC firms I used to work at is actually creating your own user guide, so that like when you're working with someone, you may not know how they work or what their working style is. So if you were gonna learn how to use a product, whether it be like your new iPad or your new air fryer, whatever it is, you get like a guide, that helps you use that. Well, it's probably useful to have a guide for people to understand how to work with you. So if you are slow to answer emails in the morning, you can put that into your guide. If you work well, like communicating through Slack instead of text message, or calls are better when it's urgent, you can put all that stuff in there as well. And it works really nicely for remote teams. So Atlassian did a nice thing about having like a playbook for this. It's really it used to be really good in the VC world when like somebody had their headphones on. That meant like for some people in their user guides, you would check like, oh, don't go talk to Jared. He's in the zone right now. Like that's what he puts the headphones on.
Yep,
Or like,
absolutely.
or Fridays, don't schedule meetings with me on Fridays. I hate that. Like that's like
Yeah.
something that you would never know unless they put it to their guide, because people are usually too polite to say these things. So yeah, you can try that out as well.
Yeah, and I put a link in there, Gary Williams, who has just done exactly that. Like he's just published on LinkedIn, how to engage with us, how do we work, and so I think he actually called it a user manual for engaging with us. So there are some really good examples around of how you can do it, and again, by making difference and diversity something that is positive and collaborative, it encourages people to talk about and to compare and to actually be interested in what is different about other people. When often being respectful and otherwise, you maybe try and be safe and try and stay with the things that that you have in common, but being interested and trying to explore some of those differences is definitely one of the ways to build trust and to help your team to perform at a higher level. So happy to answer questions on anything, not just the things that we've talked about today.
Yeah. If there's any other questions that maybe you can't think of right now, don't worry, we're going to be sending out an email afterwards with the recording. Oh, look, so we got one from Cherry. You want to take it, Grant?
Yes, thanks for asking that, Cherry, because when I looked at all the links that were on the presentation slides, I realized that that was not a link that I put in there. Just let me do this.
If you want, I'll send it out afterwards too. We're gonna send an email.
Well, so I was going to say I can put it into the chat right now because I know that I put it in my notes. So you keep thinking of questions. Ask me another question while I'm just digging this thing out. But I know that I've got it to hand, and I'll pop it in the chat in just a half a second. So, any other questions from people?
Okay. Yeah, and so folks, just in case if you do think of any more, please just keep on the lookout for an email that I'll be sending out with the recording as well as some of the slides. As also well as Grant's contact information, because he does have some great services that you can take advantage of. We also have some events that we have coming up here in Melbourne, whether that's going to be our pitch night next week, which is going to be an open pitch night for any kind of startup to pitch for a $200,000 prize pack of startup goodies. In fact, we just did our finalists for that last night. And then also we have several other virtual events that are going to be coming up, along with our signature Founder Connect networking session, which is done monthly on the first Tuesday of every month. And the way that you can get this, as well as all of our events for free, is to become a member. I'll make sure to send a link out to that as well for any membership requests. But in the meantime, you can always reach out to myself or Grant for any other questions. And it looks like Grant just did put the resource in there as well. I'll make sure to put that in the email as well, just in case folks don't have time to click on it right now. But yeah, I think we're all good. We're gonna wrap up now. If you do have any other questions, like I said, we'll just reach out directly to us. Grant, any final words?
No, not really. I did have, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn photo, maybe like yours, doesn't necessarily look exactly like the face you see in front of you now. However, Grant Downie, I'm pretty sure that you will find it pretty easily, especially if you're already connected to Ryan and some of the other people that I'm connected to. It should be pretty easy to find. So Grant Downie on LinkedIn, just send me an invite. You're always happy to connect with people who've been in these sessions. Pop me a note, happy to connect and to chat further. So it's been a real pleasure. I love sharing the things that I am passionate about, and building teams for startups is definitely one of them.
Cool. Thanks so much, Grant, for your time. We really appreciate that on behalf of myself and the Startup Network community. Everybody have a lovely day and a great week, and hopefully we'll see you in person next week on Pitch Night. But thanks again. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.